The first sign something was wrong came through my headphones at 3 in the morning, when the build finally finished compiling and the soundscape I'd spent 6 months crafting played back wrong. Not broken, wrong in a way only I would notice. A footstep cue triggering half a second early, a reverb tail clipped just enough to kill the tension. Subtle mistakes, surgical ones. I ripped the headphones off and stared at the waveform on my monitor, my pulse thudding in my ears. I knew this project better than my own apartment. I knew every breath, scrape, and silence. Those errors weren't accidents. Someone had touched my work. My name is Harper Linwood, and I'm the lead audio engineer at Ironfall Interactive, a 30-person indie game studio operating out of a converted textile warehouse near the river. We don't make flashy shooters or mobile trash. We make slow-burn narrative games, the kind critics love and investors barely tolerate. Sound matters here. Atmosphere matters. And for the past 2 years, that atmosphere had been my responsibility. Or at least, it was supposed to be. Mason Virio sat 2 desks down from me in the open-plan studio, always dressed like he was on his way to a networking event that didn't exist. Clean boots, rolled sleeves, easy smile. He joined Ironfall 8 months after I did, originally as a junior technical designer. Somewhere along the way, he decided he was also an audio expert. Or more accurately, he decided other people should think he was. At first, it was small things. A comment in a meeting that reframed my idea as his. A casual "we decided" when he meant Harper decided. I told myself I was being paranoid. Creative spaces breed ego. You pick your battles. But tonight, alone in the studio, with the hum of servers and the city breathing outside the windows, paranoia hardened into something colder. I pulled up the version history. My stomach tightened as I scrolled. There it was, an access log time-stamped just after midnight. Mason's credentials. He'd checked out my audio branch, made changes, then merged it back in under the label Final Polish. Final Polish? I felt heat crawl up my neck. My first instinct was to confront him immediately, to call his phone and let the words spill out messy and loud. But anger does stupid things to smart people. I forced myself to breathe and kept digging. The deeper I went, the worse it got. He hadn't just tweaked files. He'd rerouted triggers, altered mix priorities, and, most damning of all, left my name attached to the commits. If this build went out for review like this, the flaws would land squarely on me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling beams, trying to slow the shaking in my hands. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was strategy. The next morning, the studio buzzed with nervous energy. We were days away from sending a near-final build to our publisher. Everyone was tired. Everyone was on edge. Mason thrived in that chaos. During the audio review meeting, our creative director, Elena, frowned as a scene played. "That footstep timing feels off," she said carefully. Before I could speak, Mason leaned forward. "Yeah, we noticed that too. Harper's been pushing the system pretty hard. We're doing what we can within the constraints." I turned to him, stunned. "What?" He met my eyes with practiced concern. "I'm just saying, the vision's ambitious. Sometimes execution lags." The room went quiet. Every face turned toward me. My chest tightened, words jamming in my throat. If I accused him now without proof laid out clean and undeniable, I'd look defensive, unprofessional, exactly what he wanted. Elena nodded slowly. "Let's circle back after the publisher review," she said. "We'll need stability more than experimentation." Stability. That was code. Don't rock the boat. Don't be the problem. By lunch, Mason was already spinning the story, joking by the coffee machine about audio gremlins and last-minute miracles. People laughed. Someone clapped him on the shoulder. I ate at my desk, appetite gone, replaying the meeting in my head like a broken loop. Anger gave way to something heavier, betrayal sharp enough to sting behind my eyes. I'd trained Mason on our pipeline, trusted him with access, because that's what teams do. That trust had just been used to carve my reputation apart, quietly, efficiently. That afternoon, an email landed in my inbox from Elena. Subject line, post-launch roles. My heart pounded as I opened it. The message was polite, careful, devastating. After launch, Ironfall would be restructuring responsibilities. Mason would be stepping into a newly defined role, overseeing technical integration across departments, including audio. I sat there long after the screen dimmed, listening to the studio around me, the keyboards, the laughter, the low music someone always played too softly. This wasn't just about credit anymore. This was about erasure. As the workday ended and people filtered out, Mason stopped by my desk. "Hey," he said lightly, "no hard feelings, yeah? We're all under pressure." I looked up at him, really looked. The smile, the calm, the certainty that he'd already won. "Yeah," I said, "no hard feelings." He nodded and walked away. I stayed late again that night, but this time I wasn't fixing audio. I was copying files, logs, backups, version histories. I built a private archive, methodical and quiet, each piece slotting into place. My hands were steady now, my thoughts clear. By the time I shut down my workstation, the decision had settled fully in my chest, heavy and undeniable. Mason hadn't just crossed a line, he'd drawn one. And I knew, with a clarity that scared me, that walking away wasn't an option anymore. Revenge wasn't an impulse, it was inevitable. Revenge didn't arrive as a rush of satisfaction or some cinematic surge of purpose. It crept in quietly, disguised as routine. I still showed up early, still answered emails, still nodded in meetings. On the surface, nothing changed. Inside, everything did. I told myself I wasn't planning revenge. I was protecting myself. That distinction mattered more than I wanted to admit. At night, lying awake in my apartment with the radiator clicking and traffic whispering below the window, doubts gnawed at me. What if I was wrong? What if Mason's changes were justified, even if he handled them badly? What if exposing him backfired and I became the difficult one, the paranoid engineer who couldn't handle collaboration? I'd seen it happen before, not here but in other studios. The whistleblower doesn't become a hero, they become a liability. Fear settled in my chest, thick and familiar. I wasn't afraid of Mason. I was afraid of losing the one thing I'd spent a decade building: credibility. In this industry, your reputation travels faster than you do. One label, hard to work with, overprotective, unstable, and doors close quietly, forever. That fear slowed me down. It also sharpened me. I started mapping things out the way I mapped soundscapes, layer by layer. Mason's habits, his alliances, his blind spots. He liked visibility. He liked being seen as the fixer, the guy who stepped in when things got messy. He didn't just want credit, he wanted dependency, which meant he left fingerprints. My first small risk came disguised as curiosity. I sent a casual message to Jonah, one of our environment artists, asking if he'd noticed any issues with the latest build. I kept it light, almost bored. Jonah replied an hour later, "Yeah, actually, audio feels inconsistent between zones. Thought it was weird since you're usually rock solid." Usually. The word stuck with me. I didn't push further. I thanked him and closed the chat, heart pounding. Confirmation felt good, but it also raised the stakes. If others noticed, Mason would move faster. People like him always did. Over the next week, I began documenting everything obsessively. Not just Mason's changes, but how decisions were framed in meetings, how emails subtly shifted responsibility. I replayed recordings of stand-ups I'd saved for reference, transcribing exact phrasing. It felt paranoid. It also felt necessary. Still, doubt kept slipping in. One evening, Elena stopped by my desk as I was packing up. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Not accusing. Observant." I forced a smile. "Just focused." She hesitated. "Mason's been taking on a lot. If you need support." There it was, the narrative taking shape without me. "I'm good," I said, quickly, too quickly. She nodded, but her eyes lingered, searching for something I didn't give her. As she walked away, my stomach sank. I was already being reclassified from cornerstone to question mark. That night, I nearly deleted the archive. I hovered over the folder, cursor trembling, imagining the relief of letting it go. I could update my portfolio, reach out to old contacts, leave Ironfall before things got worse. Quiet exits were survivable. Fights weren't. Then I opened one file by accident, an early demo reel from my first month at the studio. Rough, unpolished, full of ideas that later defined the game's identity. My work, my fingerprints. Mason hadn't built that. He was standing on it. The doubt hardened into resolve. If I was going to do this, it had to be clean. No emotional outbursts, no accusations without proof. I needed Mason to expose himself. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days before the publisher review, Mason announced he'd be optimizing cross-department workflows and requested broader access permissions from production, QA, even build deployment. It was framed as efficiency. Elena approved it without hesitation. I felt a chill run through me. This wasn't just about audio anymore. He was expanding his reach. That night, I did something reckless. I altered a single audio trigger in a non-critical side sequence, one Mason had recently improved. I left everything else untouched. Then I watched. The next morning, Mason flagged the issue in a team-wide message. "Looks like some legacy audio logic is causing inconsistencies. I'll handle cleanup." Legacy, as in mine. But when I checked the logs, something interesting appeared. Mason had fixed the issue by overriding the system in a way that violated our technical guidelines, something the publisher's QA would absolutely catch. My pulse spiked. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was incompetence disguised as confidence. I saved everything. Still, the complication came fast and brutal. That afternoon, Elena announced that Mason would be leading the audio presentation during the publisher call to streamline communication. The room blurred slightly. I managed to nod along with everyone else, but inside, panic flared. If Mason spoke for my department, he could control the narrative completely. Any flaws would be mine. Any successes, his. I went home early, head pounding, plan fracturing under the weight of the timeline. I wasn't ready, not fully, and yet the moment was approaching whether I liked it or not. Late that night, an email notification lit up my phone. From the publisher's QA lead. Subject: clarification on audio system ownership. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. They were asking questions, real ones. For the first time since this began, a thin, dangerous smile crossed my face. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was a crack. The crack widened faster than I expected, and once it did, there was no way to control how much light or damage came through. The publisher's email sat unanswered in my inbox for most of the night. I reread it a dozen times, weighing every possible response. If I replied honestly, I'd be going around Mason and exposing him directly. If I deflected, I'd be complicit in my own erasure. Either way, I'd be choosing a side. By dawn, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision. I drafted a careful response, factual and restrained, outlining the audio system's architecture and clearly naming myself as its primary designer and maintainer. I attached documentation, logs, nothing emotional, nothing accusatory. Before hitting send, I paused. This wasn't revenge yet. This was a declaration. I sent it. The fallout was immediate. By the time I arrived at the studio, the energy had shifted. Conversations cut off when I walked past. People glanced at their screens a little too quickly. Mason wasn't at his desk. He showed up 20 minutes late, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He didn't look at me. He went straight into Elena's office and closed the door. I sat at my desk, heart racing, every sound amplified. This was the moment I'd feared, the private meeting where narratives get rewritten and alliances solidified without witnesses. An hour later, Elena called me in. Mason sat in the chair beside her, arms crossed, expression calm to the point of smugness. Elena gestured for me to sit. "We need to clear something up," she said. "The publisher is confused about ownership." I kept my voice steady. "I can clarify anything." Mason sighed softly, like a patient teacher. "Harper's been under a lot of stress. The audio system is collaborative. No one's disputing their contributions, but presenting it as a solo effort is misleading." Something inside me snapped, not outwardly, but inward, like a cable pulled too tight. "I never said it was solo," I replied. "I said I designed and maintained it. That's documented." Elena held up a hand. "This isn't about credit. It's about cohesion. We can't look disorganized right now." There it was again. Stability over truth. I left the office with my jaw clenched so hard it ached. The meeting hadn't resolved anything. It had only drawn lines. Mason knew I'd moved, and now he'd move too. That afternoon, the first unexpected consequence hit. My access to certain build tools was quietly downgraded. No announcement, no explanation, just an error message where permissions used to be. I stared at the screen, cold spreading through my chest. Mason didn't need to accuse me. He just needed to isolate me. That night, I broke my own rules. I accessed Mason's shared workspace, not illegally. He'd been sloppy with permissions in his rush to centralize control. What I found there changed everything. Buried among workflow charts and presentation slides was a folder labeled Publisher Feedback, Private. Inside were emails Mason had never forwarded, concerns about his technical explanations, questions about inconsistencies he'd brushed off, doubts, and then something worse. A draft proposal. Mason's proposal. A plan to pitch himself directly to the publisher as a technical director, independent of Ironfall, once the game shipped. He wasn't just climbing, he was preparing to abandon ship after stripping it for parts. My stomach turned. This wasn't just about me anymore. If this went through, Ironfall would lose leverage, maybe funding. People would lose jobs. The moral line I'd been tiptoeing along suddenly loomed in front of me. Expose him and the studio might survive, but I'd be the one who detonated the bomb. Stay silent, and I'd be complicit in something far bigger than stolen credit. Sleep was impossible. Guilt tangled with rage, tightening until I couldn't tell them apart. The next day, I took a bolder step. I requested a meeting with the publisher's QA lead under the pretense of technical clarification. I copied Elena and Mason, keeping everything transparent. Too transparent to block without looking guilty. The call was tense. Mason spoke first, smooth as ever, but this time the questions didn't let him glide. I watched his confidence falter as he stumbled over specifics he didn't actually understand. When I spoke, the room changed. I didn't attack, I explained, calmly, precisely, the way I always had. For a moment, I felt something dangerously close to vindication. Then, Mason did something I didn't expect. He claimed the disputed systems were experimental branches I'd been running without approval, that my perfectionism had introduced instability. He framed my documentation as retroactive justification. The words hit harder than I was ready for. My throat went dry. If the publisher believed him, I was finished. Elena's face on the screen was unreadable. The call ended with no conclusions, just a promise to review internally. Afterward, Elena didn't speak to me. Mason didn't need to. His message was clear. That evening, as I packed up, security stopped me at the door. "HR needs your badge," one of them said, avoiding my eyes. "Suspension, pending review." I walked out into the cold air, the warehouse door locking behind me with a sound that echoed in my chest. Everything I'd built, everything I was fighting for, suddenly felt terrifyingly fragile. At home, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You should have stayed quiet. Now you're a risk." I sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking, archive folder glowing on my laptop like a live wire. I'd pushed too far to turn back. And now, everything was on the line. Suspension is a strange kind of silence. It isn't peace, it's pressure without movement, like being buried alive with enough air to think. For 3 days, I waited. No emails, no calls, just the low hum of my laptop and the weight of everything I hadn't yet decided to do. HR's message had been clinical. Access revoked pending internal review. No timeline, no reassurance. I knew that tone. It meant someone was already shaping the conclusion. Mason's conclusion. I replayed the unknown number's message until the words felt carved into my skull. "You're a risk. Not a liar, not wrong, a risk, something to be neutralized." That was when the final shape of the plan snapped into focus, not as revenge, not as justice, but as survival. If Mason wanted to frame this as instability, I needed the opposite, undeniable clarity delivered where he couldn't intercept it. Not accusations, not emotion, proof, timing, and an audience that mattered. The publisher. I spent the next 48 hours preparing like I was about to testify in court. I reorganized the archive into clean chronological threads, access logs, commit histories, email timestamps. I annotated nothing with opinion, facts only. Every file cross-referenced, every claim supported. While I worked, doubt gnawed at me harder than before. This wasn't just about Mason anymore. If I sent this package and it went public within the publisher's leadership, Ironfall could implode. Investors panic easily. Studios die quietly all the time. I stared at the Ironfall logo on my old hoodie, threadbare from late nights and spilled coffee. I'd believed in this place, still did, but belief didn't protect you, evidence did. The unexpected reversal came from an unlikely place. Jonah called me. "I shouldn't be doing this," he said the moment I answered. His voice was tight. "But I heard you were suspended, and something felt off." I said nothing, afraid to contaminate whatever he was about to say. "Mason asked me to backdate a bug report, said it would help align narratives if QA pushed back. I didn't do it, but I saved the message." My pulse thundered. "Do you still have it?" "Yeah." That single word tipped the balance. I asked him to send it. When the file arrived, my hands shook, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what it meant. It wasn't just sabotage anymore. It was coordination, manipulation of records. I added it to the archive. The decision came at 2:17 a.m. I drafted an email to the publisher's executive producer and legal liaison. Names Mason had never looped in. I explained, briefly, that I had been suspended following internal disputes about system ownership, and that due to concerns about misrepresentation, I was providing documentation for independent review. I didn't CC Ironfall. That was the point of no return. My finger hovered over send for a long time. I thought about walking away, about letting the industry decide I was difficult, about starting over somewhere smaller, quieter. Then, I remembered Mason's smile, the calm certainty that I would fold. I sent it. The response came faster than I expected. By morning, the publisher requested a formal call, same day, mandatory attendance from Ironfall. Elena emailed me shortly after. The tone had changed. No longer distant, no longer controlled. "Why didn't you come to me?" she asked. I stared at the message, heart heavy. "Because you'd already chosen stability over truth," I thought. "Because you let him speak for me." "I tried," I typed, then closed the laptop. The call was scheduled for noon. I sat alone at my kitchen table, laptop open, notes beside me, sunlight slicing through the blinds like interrogation bars. When the screen filled with faces, publisher executives, legal counsel, Elena, Mason, I felt the room tilt. Mason looked composed. He always did. But there was a tension in his jaw now, a tightness around the eyes. He knew. The producer spoke first. "We've reviewed the materials Harper sent overnight. We have questions." Mason jumped in smoothly. "We were surprised by the timing of that outreach. It bypassed—" "Let's stick to the facts," legal counsel interrupted. For the next 40 minutes, the plan unfolded exactly as I'd designed it, and completely unlike how I'd imagined. Every time Mason tried to explain, a document contradicted him. A timestamp, a log, Jonas' message, the proposal draft. The pressure mounted visibly. His voice rose slightly. His answers grew longer, less precise. He interrupted. He deflected. Then came the unexpected blow. The publisher revealed they'd already received a confidential inquiry from Mason about transitioning into a consulting role post-launch, a conflict of interest he hadn't disclosed to Ironfall. The silence that followed was suffocating. Elena looked at Mason like she was seeing him for the first time, not angry, betrayed. Mason turned toward me, eyes sharp, calculating. "This is what you wanted, to burn everything down." My voice surprised even me. Calm, clear. "I wanted my work represented honestly." The producer ended the call abruptly. "We'll be conducting a full audit," she said, "effective immediately. Mason, you're removed from all project access pending investigation." Mason opened his mouth to argue. The screen went black. I sat there, heart pounding, adrenaline roaring in my ears. It wasn't over. Audits take time. Studios panic. People look for scapegoats. My phone buzzed. A message from Elena. "We need to talk. In person. Now." I grabbed my jacket and headed back toward the warehouse, every step heavy with consequence. As I reached the door, I saw Mason standing outside, phone pressed to his ear, face pale with rage. He noticed me and ended the call. "This isn't finished," he said quietly. I met his gaze, the weight of everything between us crackling like live wire. "I know," I replied. And as we stood there, the future of my career and the final outcome of my revenge hung balanced on a knife's edge. The investigation took 6 weeks, long enough for the adrenaline to drain away and leave only the quiet ache of waiting. Ironfall changed during that time. Meetings were canceled, Slack channels went silent, people avoided eye contact in the halls, as if tension were contagious. I was reinstated provisionally, my access restored in careful increments, but nothing felt the same. The studio that once buzzed with creative friction now moved like a body recovering from trauma, cautious, tentative, afraid of tearing something open again. Mason was gone. Officially, he was on leave. Unofficially, everyone knew better. His desk sat empty, immaculate, like a showroom that had never been lived in. No one mentioned his name. When the audit report finally arrived, it came in the form of a meeting request marked mandatory. Publisher representatives attended remotely, legal counsel too. The air in the conference room was heavy enough to taste. They laid it all out, piece by piece. Unauthorized system modifications, misrepresentation of ownership, withheld communications, attempts to manipulate internal documentation, the consulting proposal framed as a violation of fiduciary duty. Mason hadn't just been ambitious, He'd been reckless. The consequences were severe, but quiet. Termination for cause, forfeiture of bonuses, a non-compete clause enforced in full. The publisher withdrew his consulting offer before it ever formally existed. No courtroom drama, no shouting, just the steady dismantling of a carefully constructed persona. I felt no triumph watching it happen, only a strange, hollow relief, like exhaling after holding my breath for too long. The unexpected part was Elena. She asked to meet me alone after the report was delivered. We sat in her office, door closed, the city's reflections sliding across the windows as afternoon light shifted. "I failed you," she said without preamble. The words landed harder than any accusation. I hadn't expected them. I'd prepared for defensiveness, justification, corporate language. Not this. I let urgency override judgment. I confused confidence with competence, and I let someone speak over you.
I nodded slowly. I didn't know how to respond. Forgiveness felt premature. Anger felt pointless. "I don't expect trust," she added, "but I want to rebuild what we damaged, if you're willing." I thought about it for a long time, about the nights spent documenting evidence instead of sleeping, about the way my hands shook when security took my badge, about the temptation to walk away and let the industry swallow the lie. "I'll stay," I said finally, "but things change. Transparency, boundaries, no more shadows." She agreed without hesitation. Ironfall survived, barely. The publisher delayed launch but didn't pull funding. The game shipped 3 months later to strong reviews. Critics praised the sound design, calling it unsettling in the best way. My name appeared in interviews, properly, publicly. And yet, victory didn't feel like I'd imagined. Mason tried to contact me once, through a mutual acquaintance. He wanted to clear the air. I declined. Some conversations don't bring closure. They just reopen wounds. I did hear about him, though. Not the comeback he probably envisioned. Studios talk. Quietly, but relentlessly. He found contract work eventually, short-term and peripheral, the kind that never quite lets you settle in. Reputation, once fractured, doesn't heal cleanly.
There were consequences for me, too. Less visible, but real. I became careful, more guarded. Trust, once given freely, now required evidence. I double-checked permissions. I documented everything. Colleagues noticed. Some mistook it for coldness. Maybe they were right. At night, when the studio was empty and the game's soundscape played through the speakers, I sometimes caught myself listening not for flaws, but for ghosts, echoes of the person I'd been before all this, the one who believed talent spoke for itself, the one who thought doing good work was enough. It wasn't. What I learned, what still sits heavy in my chest, is that revenge isn't the opposite of injustice, it's a reaction to it. And reactions leave marks. I didn't feel powerful when it was over. I felt changed. Stronger, maybe, sharper, but also more aware of the cost of seeing clearly. I didn't destroy Mason. He did that himself, with my evidence merely holding up the mirror. That distinction matters. It's the line that lets me sleep at night.
The final irony came months later, during a conference panel on creative ethics. I was invited to speak about collaboration and credit. As I talked, I saw younger developers in the audience, listening the way I once had. I told them this: protect your work, but don't let protection become paranoia. Stand up for yourself early, and understand that silence is not neutrality, it's a choice. When the applause ended, I stepped off the stage and felt something settle into place. Revenge hadn't given me closure. Truth had. And in the end, that was enough.